In the dim underbelly of a secret research facility in Cambridge, England, the world's end began with a single act of kindness. It was just past midnight. The silence in the corridors was broken only by the hum of fluorescent lights and the low, rhythmic beeping of machines buried deep in the laboratory. Animal rights activists, cloaked in black and armed with determination and night vision goggles, crept through the halls of the facility. There were 5 of them, young, passionate, and unaware of what exactly they were about to unleash. Their leader, a woman named Alex, moved with precision, consulting a hastily drawn map of the lab's interior. Another activist, Mark, carried a crowbar in one hand and a small camera in the other, ready to capture their liberation for the world to see. They believed they were freeing tortured animals from unethical experiments. They imagined themselves as heroes. They couldn't have been more wrong. They breached the final lab door with a satisfying click, and the heavy metal swung open on squealing hinges. The room beyond was lit in sickly green, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Along one side, a row of cages stretched into the gloom. Inside the cages, chimpanzees stirred at the intrusion, not with curiosity, but with wild, unnatural agitation. Their eyes glowed red in the light. They snarled and thrashed violently, as if in a perpetual state of frenzy. "They're in distress," whispered Lisa, the group's youngest member. "We have to get them out. Now." Before anyone could respond, a man's voice shattered the quiet. "Stop!" The activists froze. A lab coat fluttered at the edge of the room as a terrified scientist stumbled into view, hands raised. He was pale, with dark rings under his eyes and an expression carved from desperation. "You can't release them," he pleaded. "They're infected. Every single one." Alex stepped forward, her voice defiant. "Infected with what? Rabies? Some flu variant? We've heard it all before." No, the scientist gasped, voice cracking. "It's not a disease in the traditional sense. It's a behavior. Engineered. Aggression made contagious. We call it rage. It's a virus, pure and simple, but unlike anything the world's seen. Please, you mustn't open the cages. Mark scoffed. You expect us to believe that? That you're just keeping them locked up because they're angry? They'll kill you, the man screamed, nearly hysterical now. Not just you, everyone. Once it's out, there's no stopping it. Alex turned back toward the cages, heart pounding but mind resolute. She wanted to believe the man. Something about his terror seemed genuine. But the sounds coming from the cages, those tortured howls, the way the chimps beat their heads against the steel bars, she thought it was just cruelty. Nothing more. Before anyone could decide, Lisa reached for the latch on the nearest cage. Don't, the scientist yelled, rushing forward. But he was too late. The cage door swung open. For a moment, there was silence. Then, chaos. The chimp inside, small, fast, and unbelievably strong, launched itself at Lisa with a guttural shriek. In an instant, it was on her, teeth bared, eyes wild. Blood sprayed across the lab as the animal sank its fangs into her face, clawing and biting without mercy. Lisa screamed once, a terrible, gurgling sound, and then her eyes glazed over. Her body seized, spasming violently. She vomited blood, twitched, and then stood. It took less than 10 seconds. Now she was infected too. Her eyes snapped open, no longer full of fear, but rage. Pure, overwhelming rage. She roared like an animal and lunged at the others. The group scattered, but they weren't fast enough. Lisa tackled Mark, slamming him into a wall, biting and scratching as he shrieked. Blood spattered the linoleum. Alex backed away, her hands trembling, eyes wide with horror. The scientist bolted, but Lisa was already chasing him down. The chimp had vanished into the room, releasing more of its kind. One after another, the cages burst open. The infected chimpanzees poured out like a tide of fury. They weren't animals anymore, they were weapons, engines of destruction powered by an unstoppable virus. Within moments, the lab was an abattoir. Screams echoed off sterile walls. Blood coated the floor. The camera Mark carried clattered to the ground, still recording as the outbreak bloomed like fire. In less than 5 minutes, everyone in the lab was either dead or infected. And the rage had escaped its cage. 28 days later, the world was no longer the same. London, once a city of motion, noise, and life, had fallen silent. The air was still. Streets that once bustled with traffic and pedestrians now lay deserted. Buses sat motionless, doors ajar, as if their passengers had simply vanished. Trash drifted like tumbleweeds along the curbs. Abandoned cars clogged the roads, some with doors wide open, others crashed into poles, smeared with dried blood. Empty shoes and scattered luggage littered the sidewalks, suggesting a mass exodus, or something far worse. In the heart of the city, within the sterile walls of a hospital, Jim opened his eyes. He lay in a dim room, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. And 4 was still taped to his arm, its bag long since drained. He blinked slowly, trying to orient himself, but the fog in his mind was thick. His mouth was dry, his body weak, and his limbs felt like rubber. Jim sat up slowly, disoriented. No nurses. No doctors. No sound. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, flinching at the cold floor beneath his bare feet. The hospital gown he wore hung loosely on his thin frame. He'd lost weight, though he couldn't remember why. Or how long he'd been there. He called out softly. "Hello?" No response. He tried again, louder this time. "Is anyone there?" Silence. Panic began to crawl up his spine. Something wasn't right. Hospitals weren't supposed to be abandoned. Jim staggered into the hallway, clutching at walls for balance. Wheelchairs sat empty. Papers were strewn across the floor. A coffee cup, long dried, rested on the edge of the nurse's station, as if frozen in time. A telephone receiver dangled from its cradle, gently swinging. He passed a gurney with a blanket pulled up over a body. Jim hesitated. He reached out, trembling, and pulled the blanket down. It was a corpse. Pale. Mouth agape. Eyes glazed over in death. Jim stumbled backward, heart hammering. He turned and ran. Room after room, hallway after hallway, all empty. No staff. No patients. No life. He eventually found a locker room, where he changed into an oversized t-shirt and a pair of too big cargo pants he found in a lost and found bin. A pair of trainers lay by the door. He put them on, even though they didn't quite fit. Then, he stepped outside. The sunlight was blinding. Jim shielded his eyes as he emerged into the city. The streets of London stretched before him, not bustling, not noisy, but abandoned. He walked in a daze past newspaper stands still holding headlines from nearly a month ago. Evacuation ordered, mysterious outbreak spreads, government collapses. A red phone booth had been shattered. A military tank stood alone in the middle of a roundabout, its hatch open, its crew long gone. Jim wandered through the city like a ghost, calling out to the void. "Hello?" No answer. His voice echoed off buildings and vanished into the stillness. He found his way to Piccadilly Circus, once alive with neon lights and tourists. Now, it was desolate. The giant screens were dark. The only movement came from a breeze fluttering a plastic bag across the pavement. Jim climbed the steps of a church, where he found dozens of candles burned down to waxy puddles. Prayer notes lined the pews. Messages scrawled in desperation. "We're heading north. They took Jenny. I don't know where. If you find this, we try to wait." And then, painted in red across the altar, "The end is extremely fking nigh." Jim felt a chill crawl through his bones. Suddenly, a sound. A scuffle. The shuffle of feet. He turned toward the noise, heart pounding. From a shadowy hallway near the back of the church, a man lurched into view. Or what had once been a man. His clothes were soaked in dried blood. His mouth hung open. And his eyes, red, bloodshot, and full of hatred. Jim took a step back. "Are you okay?" The man didn't speak. He growled, low and animalistic, and charged. Jim turned and ran, stumbling down the steps, heart hammering in his chest. Behind him, more infected emerged from the church, fast, snarling, sprinting with a mindless hunger. Not zombies, not the slow-moving undead. These were human bodies possessed by rage. Jim ran blindly down alleyways, breath ragged, legs burning. Suddenly, boom! A Molotov cocktail exploded behind him, engulfing one of the infected in fire. Jim stumbled backward as a second bottle crashed against the wall, flames flaring to life. From a rooftop above, two figures appeared. One of them shouted down, "Get up! This way! Move!" Jim followed as the strangers led him through a narrow alley and into a convenience store. They slammed a heavy metal door behind him, barricading it with shelves and crates. The infected pounded against the door, howling, but they were too late. Jim collapsed to the floor, gasping. The man who had helped him was tall, muscular, dressed in scavenged gear. The woman beside him had sharp eyes and carried a machete. "I'm Selena," she said, offering him a bottle of water. "That's Mark." Jim took the bottle with shaking hands. What are they?" Mark answered grimly. "Infected. With something called rage. If they bite you, or even scratch you, you're one of them in seconds." Selena cut in. "You were lucky we found you." Jim tried to process everything, but his mind reeled. "I've been in a coma. I don't know what's going on." Mark gave a bitter laugh. "Then you missed the worst of it." Jim looked up at them. "What happened?" Selena met his eyes, her voice cold and steady. "The world ended.